Thank you so much for staying tuned to this channel. Welcome to yet another edition of International Forum. I am Wilson Marshall. Today is all about China. Yes, every 14th March, 5 years intervals, they come out to elect a president, and the man Xi Jinping has been re-elected for the third time for the next 5 years to rule China. Yes, over 2,952, so to speak, members of Congress voted for Xi Jinping. Not even one voted against him. Now that felt like saying, look, is this really democracy, or the massive love for this man is so huge that they cannot fathom it, they cannot measure it. They're saying that he is the hope of China because of his antecedents, ingenuity, and the way he's handling China. What do you feel about that? Anyway, my analysts really want to throw more light on this because we are taking a look at his emergence for the third term, the global impact this will be having. Don't forget about the threat warning issued by China to the U.S., the warning also issued to China by the U.S. So many things are just happening at the same time, all at once, globally speaking. But today we're zooming on the China politics, the globalization, and we may bring us some other fact figures about the impact of this particular election. After all, our own President Muhammadu Buhari has already congratulated Xi Jinping, the president of China, for his third term bid in office. With me here in the studio, I have political analyst, political affairs commentator, a politician, an entrepreneur. Join me to welcome Honorable Etiosa Igebo, aka Sunny.
Good afternoon, viewers.
Pleasure having you here with me in the studio.
Thank you very much. Bigger
right.
Sunny.
Sitting very close to him, a legal practitioner, political analyst, political affairs commentator, a human rights activist. Join me to welcome Barrister Emmanuel Obakbola. Barrister, welcome to International Forum. Appreciate your coming.
I'm delighted to be here. Good afternoon.
Let's talk about his extra name. He has an extra name.
An extra name. What should that be really?
We'll work it out.
We'll work it out. Yeah. I'll give you an extra name. All right now, the man Xi Jinping for the third term running has been elected by the Congress in China to go ahead with the mantle for the next 5 years. Don't forget, this man came into power 2013, March 14 to be precise. And right now, not even a single member of the House voted against Xi Jinping. Over 2,000 representatives. No one's raised an objection or said, no, Mr. President, we don't really like your style. They all went in one direction. Since Xi Jinping has always been the right man for the job, he will continue to be the right man for the job. Some congratulated him, others are saying, no, this is not democracy. Now, when the news filtered into the atmosphere, I want to start off with Honorable Etiosa. What do you feel about it?
Well, I think when you compare the Chinese type of government to the current democracy that is widely practiced in most countries across the world, and predominantly in Africa, where democracy is still suffering, and the achievement of what democratic tendencies is supposed to put on the life of the people is still difficult. You would agree with me that it's a very kind of a rare governmental system that has worked to the benefit of the Chinese people. The reason why I'm saying this is that I was having a conversation just about a day or two ago, and people who have visited China will tell you how beautiful China is. You know, they will talk about the bullet trains, how they travel from one city to another, a journey that could take you 6 or 7 hours in Nigeria, for instance, or in African states, that would take you 30 minutes. You see what I mean? Which means development in terms of infrastructure is so solid. And the coming of Xi Jinping has strengthened that resolve. You know, at the same time, they probably have a long-term blueprint, which involves elevating the Chinese citizens from poverty, which you can agree with me today in the 23rd century. There are a lot of people, Chinese, who have become very wealthy through production and export of goods and services. So if that model of economic and infrastructural and human capacity development is working along the lines that they've outlined for the betterment of the Chinese people, I'm sure you can agree with me that's probably why the people of China, or perhaps the Congress, for the first time may have voted 100% to say, well, we want this man to continue for another 5 years, which leaves his total time on reign by the time it ends to about 15 years. It may sound strange, but adversely, I think when you have the right time or period to run a government, it can also help create some kind of sustainable stability to a very large extent. But that is not to say maybe there may not be a little wink here and there, whereby maybe certain people feel that, well, even if the majority is with him, they don't want to be this odd one out, or perhaps made a scapegoat to a large extent. And I think predominantly that's probably what may have played that role, why the Xi Jinping thing is working, because China as a country is working. The infrastructure is amazing, the technology is beautiful, the people has a sense of belonging, and it has become a reference point to other developing or developed countries today. And I'm sure we all can agree to a large extent that China doing so well and his reign as the president for the last 10 years may not have been too bad. Perhaps that is why they trusted me with another tenor.
All right, the clip you just saw, courtesy NBC, they were the one I really covered, how will I put it now, one of the TV stations that really covered the inauguration of Xi Jinping, how was elected into the House. You see more of those clips in course of this discussion. He said China is doing well, hence they deemed it fit to re-elect Xi Jinping as their president. 2,952 members of Congress voted for the same man. Not even one soul opposed him in the election. What do you have to say about that? Is it because of the economy, or because of what people are saying is high-handedness, or will I put it now, an authoritarian a president or autocratic president, hence the fear to go against Xi Jinping?
Well, just now, the man has done well for himself.
For himself or for China?
I'm coming.
Okay.
For himself and also for the people of China. If you look at China just now, and you want to make an attempt to compare China with what she used to be in the early 70s, where she deliberately, consciously submitted her sovereignty to the United States of America with respect to the acquisition and the rulership of Thailand. And also if you look at, also want to make the comparison in the 80s, the 90s, then the early 2000 and the millennium we find ourselves just now, one will not have anything on the contrary but to give kudos to this man just now. However, the Chinese style of democracy may not near perfect, because for all members of the National People's Congress, 2,952 of them to have voted for him, it goes to tell that the man has succeeded in making himself a Chinese idol. And we do hope that he wouldn't toe the line of the president of North Korea, who sees himself as not just a political idol, but also an ancestral idol in North Korea. So, however, China has done well. And this man has been the arrowhead to achieving what China just now is possessing. You can see that before now, when America sneezes, China quiver. But today, the reverse is now the case. When China sneezes, America quivers, because they now see an opposition. They now see strength in the then, once upon a time, China that voluntarily, consciously submitted leadership to the United States of America and other community of the world. So one would really indeed say that the Asian tigers, as led by Chinese just now, are really doing pretty good. And that is why maybe the people didn't hesitate but to vote him. And also, you see that the People's Liberation Army, one of the strongest group in China, also have submitted their supremacy to him. The man is now in charge of everything. Give and take. The man has made himself a political idol in China.
All right, now there used to be a separation of power in China, but since this man stepped to the scene, from report he has acquired these powers to himself, making him the de facto, the only leader, the only one that can really issue out anything from these three branches of governance in China. Don't you think that is giving this man too much power?
No, not necessarily. I think the Chinese run a colonialist government, and at the same time, between you and I think there's a lot that's got to do with Chinese policy saying you must do things the right way. The minute you're not doing things the right way, there comes that tendencies of what they call the Chinese governmental oppression. So a lot of the things that I've seen with the Chinese government is not all necessarily maybe you having a different opinion to what they're doing. It's more like they're not tolerating the slightest of whatever that is wrong to undermine the Chinese blueprint of development. Because they've seen that the benefits that they have over this period of time, from like my brother said, from in the early 70s till now, it has been moving from how next door to happiness leaves sorrow, from sorrow to happiness. And if these people have been able to do that within 2 or 2.5 decades to 3 decades, you can understand why they are very unrepentant when it comes to dealing with any Chinese government officials that are seen, in quote, to be of a corrupt practices, as they say. Not to say it is perfect, because at the same time, they've created an environment, an enabling environment where all Chinese citizens, common Chinese citizens, has become rich from trading with the art world, which means they have the capacity to produce, which means you have access to loans, unlike in many other countries around the world, whereby the Chinese companies and citizens who goes into business also enjoy the idea of when foreign investment comes into China, a Chinese citizen is understood and meant to own 50% of that investment, which means all the opportunities are there for the Chinese people to grab. So if you are doing something that is not right in government, believe me, it's really going to be bad. So, but in practice, or in the sense to say, well, the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, has accrued those powers to him through the operating part in terms of how things are done in China. It could be down to certain experience that they may have had with certain region not living up to standard. Because remember, China is a huge country. It's a country that houses about 1.4 billion people. The 4.4 of the billion, Nigeria is not even close to their numbers. Nigeria is 200 million. Look at all the challenges we have. You know, for somebody in his character, and even when you look at his posture, you can tell Xi Jinping is relatively a man that carries a certain charisma. And he has a courage whereby, even if in the heights of what happened with Taiwan, like he said, they ceded power to Taiwan, and they did all those military drills and whatever, you can tell to a very large extent the man was conscious of where the Chinese challenges may come from. And he knows when to soft pedal, and he knows when to have a hard line. You see, that is a man that even if he runs a colonist country, and we know the way Chinese government runs, he has been able to bring down the human in him. Nobody in China today is crying over certain things. In terms of China has become more and more a free country. I think it's under his rule that they said the Chinese can even have more kids.
Yes.
Unlike before, they can only have one child. So this sort of thing may have worked in his favor, whereby the small minority of people who may want to challenge him and say, well, why not just give him a chance? This is the man that has been in power for 10 years. And now he's going for another 5 years, good or bad, no matter what. Chinese people that we know, that they can be very stubborn. They can be quite stubborn. They cannot just all put their hands or their tail in between their legs to allow one man to come and just have his way. By so doing, everybody in Congress wants to vote for him if he doesn't possess that leadership quality. So I do believe quite well that the understanding, rather, of the regions wanting to have a one-China policy, which means if China is working in Beijing and in Wuhan, in whatever mega cities, the same thing should go across the entire China country. So I think that is probably the reason why people are finding reasons to work with him and give him a kind of a flawless victory to go back and run for another 5 years. I think it's something to be proud of.
Yeah, flawless victory. Talking about 2,952 against nothing, 0. Everyone just want to say Xi Jinping is the man to be. They all push their own vote towards this direction. Not even a rep or member of the House said no to the presidential bid, short term for that matter, of Xi Jinping. Let's come to the aspect of autocracy. Let's come to the aspect of high-handedness. Don't forget that China has been accused of violating human rights in various aspects. Do you think this is part of it that's made them to be so scared to stand against Xi Jinping as a president?
Well, that may be a factor, but however, when a man has done well, the people also have a way of telling the man, you have done well. Before the emergence of Xi Jinping as the president of the People's Republic of China, you discovered that China was barricaded with a catalog of calamities, so many challenges here and there. But when he came on board, what he did that is so spectacular was to have looked inward. Let's look inward. What do we do? The Western way of doing things, the Western pattern of education, before you know, Chinese came out of it and said, no, we can do better when we look inward. And they looked inward. And before you know, development began to start. And today, Chinese has 80 or near 90% of developing nation as its markets. Most of what Chinese produces, they take it to developing nations. They flood it. That is what they do. That is their style. So you will now look at a man who could come and say, look, I think we have something better inside of us than what we think we have outside of us. And the people now said, okay, let's compromise a little and see whether what this man is saying can yield any result. And today, China has so much fruit as its own testimony that she can give to the whole world. And that's why some big nations, superpower nations, are today beginning to say, China is to be reckoned with in the in global community. So when you look at global community, when you look at all of these that has transpired within this shortest epoch of his rulership, you begin to see the reason why the people really allowed him to have his way, rather than considering it to be authoritarianism, or that maybe there was a kind of force, maybe there was a kind of ambushment. To my mind, I do not think that there is an ambushment here. Rather, I see the people compromising. Look, a man can only be a superman when he has the people behind him. Whether the backing of the people is force, or the backing of the people is not by their own volition, that we cannot tell just now. But all that we can see is that upon its emergence as the leader of the People's Republic of China, there has been development. China has grown beyond the imagination of superpowers of the world. So maybe on that note, the people have given him this mandate so that he cannot manage the authority that they have on them. So when we talk of force, authoritarianism, that maybe the people just gave in, schemingly gave in because there was force, I wouldn't want to delve into that. Rather, I would want to look at it from the angle of development. If you take, for instance, developing nations, most African countries, you see today, the leadership has become something that worries every African. So if African leaders can sit right, just like Xi Jinping, and say, look, we have something inward, inside of us, that can give us something better than that which we think is outside of us, and begin to develop Africa and most African nations, just as this man has done the magic. I think Xi Jinping is more of a magician than an authoritarian president.
More of a magician than an authoritarian president. We'll return after this break. We'll go to extreme more into the image of Xi Jinping as the president of China for the thought. And many persons have various opinions about this. And later we're going to dive also into global implication. Don't go away. This is International Forum. Thank you so much for staying tuned. If you just joined us, this is International Forum taking a look at the emergence of Xi Jinping for the third time as China president. Global impact. And of course, I have Barrister Emmanuel Obapolo and Honorable Etiosa Igiebo. They are showing their thoughts and opinions on this particular discussion. Now, let me come to you, Honorable. Some of the opinion that China is not practicing true democracy. That is the reason why we are seeing what we are seeing right now in China. What do you have to say about that?
Before I speak on that issue of true democracy, let me just digress a little bit on the aspect of authoritarianism and heavy-handedness on the part of the Chinese government. These are messages and insinuation that comes from the international communities most of the time. Yes, there's no country in the world that is free of any sort of authoritarian rulership tendencies. Even in Africa, it happens. In America, it happens. Even in Europe, it does happen. But however, when it comes to the Chinese case, a lot of the drum that is being beaten along those lines comes from those people who see China as an emerging economy, and most particularly the United States of America. You will never see the Russians telling you that the Chinese are authoritarian, because this aspect of being authoritarian and a way of life has a lot to do with how people live as a local, as to what and how they carry their values to interface with other international community. Everybody has their values to a very large extent. You have yours, they have theirs. But the question is, whose values is more superior? Most times they'll say, well, I think mine is better. Well, in China, when you're made to wear one glasses, in America or in the European countries, you don't do that. But the Chinese are saying, well, you do your bit and I do our bit. This is our way of living, and the issue and question mark of authoritarianism comes in. But then again, it's more like who will bear the cat. We are caught in between the pain and the hot place. You that is saying that the Chinese are authoritarian, how do you marry that to what is happening in your own area that the Chinese sometimes talk about, that you play down? But in reality, we understand that those sort of authoritarianism is happening, especially when it comes to international and foreign interest. However, coming back to the question you asked in terms of true democracy, I can equally and easily throw back the questions to you to say, well, what is democracy? The democracy is getting dividends of good governance. And in China today, with all due respect to the people who says, well, on paper, they may not be practicing good democracy, but in reality, these Chinese citizens are enjoying the democracy because they have their infrastructure working, they have their banking system restructured and is working, they have the citizens getting involved and retrained and being trained, engaging with businesses, they're making money, interfacing with the world. You have companies exporting their human resource capital in terms of outsourcing their jobs into China. All these are because of the fact that the China business policy suits the narrative of what will make Chinese and the China as a country grow. So to me, would you say it is a situation whereby somebody says we are practicing democracy on ground, on paper, but on ground, physical aspect, you don't see nothing, or you want to look at it from the point whereby a particular government or region is seen to be authoritarian, but in practice and in reality, you can actually see the dividends of democracy in the lives of the people, not just in the millennium development, in the sustainable the Millennium Development Goals, but in line with Sustainable Development Goals. Chinese has put their investment and their infrastructure in place. They've been able to sustain it and improve in this system. So to me, how beautiful can, in quotes, a very authoritarian, columnist country that do not practice democracy will be able to outrun people who cry every day that they're running a democracy, but in practice, you don't feel none of that presence in terms of the life of the people. So, to me, with all due respect to the people who may have said that, I think we should come back and look at the reality on ground. We should look at the way the Chinese have molded their country. We should look at the issues of their fiscal policies. We should look at the issues of their monetary policy. Is the currency they use is stabilizing the economy in the world market? Yes, it is. Whatever they are doing in the 70s and now in the year 2023, have they made massive improvements and changes? Well, these are the things and the KPIs and areas at which we will x-ray what they've done and then come back and say, well, I don't think democracy is thriving in China, or maybe democracy isn't thriving. So to me, in my opinion, I think the Chinese government has taken the world by storm. I think they've now become a global leader in terms of development and setting a pace. And to me, all the tenets and actions of democracy is centered around that. And I think the issue of being a colonist country and a country that doesn't run democracy becomes a third or a non-issue. Because at the end of the day, the people have actually done well. Those who have visited China have said that. I have visited China myself. We know the development is there. They are strong economically. They are strong militarily. To me, I think democracy lands and settled in China.
In China. All right. So you say they're practicing true democracy.
Yes, of course.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you the same question, but like a spin-off to this question. Some are saying that the members of Congress, they're just rubber stamp. Hence, no one had the balls or the temerity or the guts to stand against the Jinping. Take it from those two angles.
Yes, I did say in my introduction that Xi Jinping has made himself a political idol. In China. So in that kind of situation where you would find out that the Congress may just surrender their powers to him. That is very much possible. And with respect to true democracy or no true democracy, I want to align with him a bit, then deviate a little. Align with him to the extent that, what is democracy? Like the question he asked. Democracy is giving the people the fruit or the dividends of what? Governance. That is democracy. The german question now is, are the people of China getting the fruit of governance? The answer is a yes, to the best of my ability. So on that note, I would want to agree with him that I do not see any form of oppression or oppressive tendency in China. However, there is no nation in the world just now that practices perfect democracy. If we are to go by the definition of democracy as we are made to understand. However, you still see China to some extent with the communist system being put in place. When you try to drive in your point from the factors considered by George Orwell in his book Animal Farm, we would want to agree that communist system is not a near democracy system. You would want to agree with that.
But still, like I say, called People's Republic of China a democracy.
Yes, People's
Republic of China.
I am coming there. Yeah. People with the capital letter S attached to it to be peoples. Now you can see that instead of saying the people of China, they are not saying the peoples of China.
Republic.
Because
it's not democratic.
Do you know why? Yeah. You know why? Because the population is overwhelming. Like he said, a population of about 1.4 billion.
And counting.
And still counting. No nation in the world can house that kind of crowd, that kind of numbers of people.
And remain one.
Remain one.
Yes. Yet they are one. Yet they are progressing. You can't compare China of today and the China of 10 years ago. You can't. The coloration will be too much. And the man has done well. Yeah, we are faced with cash crunch. We are made to understand that policy was just for the election period. But here we are. Even when there's an order by the topmost courts in the country, people are still saying, we will not do it. So, but over there, they don't come across things like this. Things like that are non-issue. Those people punish crime. They punish it. They dare crime on the face. But yeah, we pamper and celebrate crime. And we call our system what? A democratic system. Now compare and contrast. Who is indeed not practicing democracy? We want to compare us and China. So I think even the so-called United States of America, the United Kingdom, you also have racism there. True or false? You have other things there against humanity. If you put all of those on the table, does it not amount to the violation of human rights? Okay, if there is a violation of human rights, can we now say they practice perfect democracy? I think the answer is an emphatic no too.
Your next destination.
Xi Jinping, to the best of my knowledge, just now, he has done well. But the human factor will always be there. Because the tendency of saying, oh, now that I'm a political idol, let me now raise my shoulders so high, will be there. The temptation will be there. So, but then, when we look at what Chinese has developed, what Chinese has benefited, what Chinese has given out to the world under his rulership, we have no choice but to give kudos to him.
Okay, some are saying this is just a step to remain in power forever till he passes on. And that seems to be, like, you know, the burner, so to speak, of political analysts saying that this is like a step to his dream of ruling China till he retires or till something, or maybe till he pays the ultimate prize. How true is that?
Well,
life
is subject to speculations. Most of the times when truth are not spoken against people, people don't tend to want to bother to find out the facts. And it has always been the case. I'm sure you and I are victims of the same thing. Life is designed that way. It's like a building block. You have the naysayers, you have the rumor mongers, you have the serious guys, those you don't see on the face of the social media, and those who are making things, how things work and making things work, and those who just wants to also listen to those rumors. Most of the time, I always say to people, I don't really watch TV because I know that those on TV are getting paid for being on TV. And I'm sitting there and watching the TV, I'm not getting paid. So to say that Xi Jinping wants to be in power forever, well, I know that absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
But irrespective of that, this is a man that has been in power for 10 years. And just to tee off what my brother Abakwala said, now that he's going for the 15-year rule, he must start to raise his shoulders. If he wants to raise his shoulder, he would have been raising his shoulder 10 years ago. Every regular Nigerian gets an appointment into office or get elected. He wouldn't even pick up the phone of his best friend. They start from the very first day they are sworn in.
Now,
so with the Chinese,
now that is hot. That is hot.
You know, sometimes the truth is bitter. We just need to say it, you know, because to them they move a different leaf now. They're in a different level and a different kidder. But what I don't understand that in my adage, they say when you take a pea somewhere and the pea goes far, eventually it comes back to the owner. So whatever you do or wherever you go, if you're not a monarch and you're not the Oba, who stays in power to the day he dies, then even if the monarch themselves are still very human, they are human beings. They relate with people, they interface with their friends. I think it is a lesson to learn from those people who gets appointed or voted into power for a period of time and start to act funny. So for Xi Jinping, in my own genuine and honest view, I know that you know, people will speculate all kinds of things about Chinese, but the question goes back to him being in government, and at the same time, is the governance working? When he talked about the United Kingdom and America, I was not wondering if his love was deviated away from those countries. But then again, I quickly pinched myself and I realized we're talking about China now, not Russia and Ukraine.
Ukraine, yeah.
You know what I mean? So maybe he may have a kind of a rethink when it comes to that aspect, because the hypocrisy, liking to gossip and naysayer has always been the burden of those who are idle. Like they say, an idle mind is a devil's workshop. And these are the things that you hear in a country like Nigeria most of the time. Because the government of the day or the political system or the democratic system has not created enough to get us busy and engage these people on what they should do. They've made them slaves and made them feel bad with sorrowful tendencies and frustration in your own country. If China can be 1.4 billion people and they can still have a hold on the country whereby every Chinese citizens are doing well, if you are traveling from one end of China to the other, even if it takes you 21 hours by train, the development is the same. And then you not really fall back and say, why in your own country? No matter how big it might be, that is not even a third of the, or it's a 1/4 or 1/4 of the size of China. Why can't we have the same goodwill from government transferred to the people? That takes us back to the system. When they say the Chinese government is harsh on the people, they will not tolerate a civil servant or anybody in government who wants to undermine the blueprint they put on ground. Because the only way Xi Jinping will remain in power till he dies is to give dividends from democracy to the people. And he's doing that just now, irrespective of the size. They are all finding a way to rally around behind him. So I think that should be like a tee-off point for people who has interest in governance and in government to find a way to give what the desired goodwill of social and welfare to the people, which means infrastructure, security, foreign direct investment, SMEs, countries and people and smaller businesses that will drive the economy, because that plays about 60, 70, 80% of any economy that is successful in the world. Not just government employing people and creating jobs for you, and at the same time having human face. When you have a human face and you are ruthless with corruption, to a very large extent, Xi Jinping, in their own assumption of, naysayers, I might say, might become a reality because he has turned that bad will into something positive, whereby you can say, well, he wants to rule forever, but China is working. Over here, just 4 years, the love would have gone sour. He talked about the issue of Naira redesign policy. With all due respect, if nobody respects what the presidency has said, the president himself is probably part of the whole plan. Maybe. Maybe he's the kind of man that will just sit back and, well, you know what to do. The Supreme Court has spoken. Go and just pronounce to the Nigerian public and just allow them to have their money. And let currency exchange work side by side. That is what I've stood for. And that is what I'll continue to stand for. Because the truth is,
that has been rectified already. Because there's been an order. Go ahead, do it.
Wait a minute. No, today, the people are still struggling, trying to get money to buy basic things from the banks. Like I said, the banks' hands are tied. The CBN governor alone is carrying enmity over the issue of currency. I don't know.
But right now, that has been settled. They've been given order to the banks to please release
the banks have not released the money. What he needs to do is to understand that people have lost life because they can't get money to spend. He should come on board, go on TV, speak to the banks and say, give them this money.
They have done that via
Wait a minute.
Thank you.
Wait a minute.
Uncle, please.
See, let me tell you, we cannot speak on China
that's about
as
Nigeria.
a colonist country. No, as a colonist country who is supposed to be an autocratic nation, having all the tendencies of democracy. What you said, the issue of currency problem is not in China. And then you come back to Africa where we're still struggling to stand on our feet. And these things are happening, I know because of certain rules and regulations, we are economical with the truth. It should go and pronounce and let people spend this money and have a good life.
Okay, well, it may interest you to know that Xi Jinping made one promise when he was elected into office on 2013, March 14. He said, look, he wants to raise at least 100 million millionaires in China.
Yes.
And he has broken that record.
Yes.
Imagine
at least
that.
more than 100 million millionaires, not thousand, not hundred.
In dollars.
In dollars.
Millionaires in dollars.
100 million millionaires in China. He has broken that record because they are prospering. And according to reports, we're able to infuse some good part of capitalism into the communists to make them tick. And now they are working shoulder to shoulder with other great nations of the world. Let's talk about global politics right now. Should superpowers vis-a-vis US be worried about this kind of event in China? Over to you, Barrister.
They're already worried. They're already worried. That's why I said the other time that China came up with the balloon. Let me quote now, palaver.
They call it spy balloon.
Yes,
let's call it that.
Weather spy balloon. You saw the reaction, and I did say on this platform that there was really need for the United States of America to have reacted, because one, China of today is not the China of yesteryears. It's not the China of the 70s. It's not the China of the 80s. It's not the China of the 90s. It's not even the China of this decade. It's a China with revolution, a kind of thunder blast revolution you can see in China. Remember, I did say that this is a country where, upon the emergence of the current president, they looked within. What can we do to ourselves? How do we help ourselves? Even the Western style of education, they jettisoned it. And they developed their own. And I think every good leader, every reasonable leader, every leader that has foresight, every visionary leader should act the way Xi Jinping acted in China. And the man boasted. that by the time I come in, I am going to make 100 million millionaires in dollars. And the man has surpassed that. Then tell me, what else do the Chinese need from somebody like him? So when you rule well, the people can come and tell you, we donate our power to you. I don't think that amounts to. Well. Yes, when you lead well, rather.
A lead or rule. What's the difference? You're ruling well. You're leading well.
Okay, yes, lead well. Because when you lead well, then the people will come and say, oh, please, you can't continue. However, the Chinese constitution just now does not allow for any form of life presidency. It has a time limit, and I think they will maintain their lifespan because these people are law keepers.
As it stands right now, that jinx of having a life ceiling or lifespan been broken. He has the right to contest over and over again if he wants to. That I don't have made a long time.
That does not make him. That does not make him a life president.
Okay,
he can contest, and another person can contest with him.
With this 2,252 votes to 0, do you see anyone contesting with him?
I'm sure when the right time comes, the way they do it in China, the man would on his own step down.
Give way.
It has always been that way. So
yes.
Give birth to a new idea, a new energy. You know, an energy that will take you to the next level. I think in Nigeria we got a president-elect. You know, and I think that I liken him to Xi Jinping. He's a man with a lot of ability. And I
know where you are driving out. I know where you are driving. I know where you are driving out.
We're going to have a Nigerian that will start.
Don't allow me to speak. Don't allow me to speak.
Okay, now should developed countries be worried about this?
Well, I personally don't think that they should be worried. The only reasons why developing countries are worried is because of what they call the hegemony syndrome.
The hegemony syndrome?
Yeah, power tussle. Because they said it's wanted to be rich, and the next thing is to have money. A rich man that has no money can be messed up when you're messing with people that's got power. So power and money running side by side becomes a different ballgame entirely. So I don't think they should be worried. If the world must have peace, like when Michael Jackson sang, now heal the world. If the world must be healed, we must appeal to the conscience of the populist country with a superpower status to allow people to exist and also live within different regions, because the different cultures are very different. China is very far from the US and very far from Europe. If they understand that they don't need to impress me or impress you, impress anybody, and allow them to grow in their own and have their own ability to defend themselves, I think that idea of being worried will be a thing of the past. But because we are human and we are perpetually, caught up in the mix of wanting to be in charge of everything, that becomes a question for another day, to know whether or not that their worry, in my own view, should be what the model they adopt.
All right, gentlemen, we've gone so much in this particular discussion. You have 30 seconds each before we hit the hour. What advice do you have from developing countries? What can they learn from Chinese government? Over to you, Barrister.
What developing nations should learn is to look inward, to see how they can develop themselves, and not to depend on Western development, because over the years, the Western development is they are so sentimental with it. They look at those parts of it that is not liking to develop Africa, and they give it to us.
Thank you.
And funny enough, we buy it hook, line, and sinker.
Thank you so much, Barrister. Honorable, briefly, 30 seconds.
Well, when it says look inwards, it's about looking inwards and looking for those people, like when Ty Solari put a light on his head, looking for the people with good conscience in this country, in Nigeria, who can hold offices and understand that it's just a transit. It's a period of time that you'll be there and provide the dividends of democracy, and look more into the civil service platform where people are able to sustain policies that will help drive processes to replicate what they call democracy.
All right,
I think that is the lesson we should learn.
Thank you so much. You've heard from both of them. Xi Jinping right now, third term running, 15 years. Is it going to be a life president? We don't know, but the Chinese people, they are gaining massively from this. Over 100 million.
Can you imagine?
Millionaires. He has surpassed it, and China
100 million, not 1 million. 100 million.
They should learn from China. We should learn from China. We'll do it next week, Tuesday, God willing. Bye for now.